Well. We're a little bit more impromptu at this particular episode of On the Grind, largely because of the subject matter. As of late, there has been a bill that has been passed in the state of Texas that a lot of YouTubers are saying is going to ban anime. Well, that's not really accurate, and we're going to be discussing exactly that. And then, maybe or maybe not, we will have an appearance by Hatman, but if not, we will have his commentary on the particular bill, and things along those lines. And we'll also be talking about if there are anime that could actually fall into what this ban would entail, and ones that probably would not, and where or where not things might get tied up in the courts. So, let's go ahead and get right to it. Welcome again, ladies and gentlemen, to On the Grind. Alright. So, before we get started, I have been forgetting to do this again because I am a dork. Let's go ahead and let you guys know who exactly is joining us this week. Obviously, I am Micah Curtis, the head of Grindstone Arts. With me is my social media manager, Serena.
Hello.
And our editor-in-chief, Mike.
Hello.
So this one is going to be an interesting discussion because people have been losing their fucking minds over this particular bill without actually reading it. And keep in mind, I am not a lawyer. My business partner is obviously, in law school, so he's more learned on such things than I am. But at the same time, I at least have a little bit of experience reading, legalese. So I'm kind of able to understand exactly like what's going on here in regards to the law, and discussing exactly what is going on in Texas law. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about exactly what is in the bill itself. We're going to talk about the definitions that are in it, because the definitions are very important. And we're also going to talk about the context of the bill, because a lot of what has been put forward is this idea that any sort of anime that has an underage character in it is going to get banned. Anything that has any sort of sexuality is going to get banned. Anything with any nudity is going to get banned. That's not what's going on here. I don't know if Japanese companies are scared of having to do such a thing, but I have a feeling that that's being blown out of proportion too, because this is a YouTube thing. And I want to get this out of the way before really we get into, the nitty gritty of it. There's a lot of people on YouTube, folks, that lie to you. A lot of them. And a lot of, this is sort of the reason why I'm very upset that Nick Rekieta had the downfall he did. Because Nick, when he was relatively sober, could at least be somewhat insightful and honest about laws like this and how to read them and so on and so forth. Now that Nick has, fallen from grace in the way that he has, which I'm still praying for the guy. I hope he at some point realizes what he's doing wrong and gets better. He at the very least was able to offer some sort of insight. Now there's not really a whole lot of people on YouTube that are able to do it or are willing to really buck against what the general sentiment on YouTube is. The general sentiment on YouTube is almost always panic, and it's almost always to institute a Pavlovian response. For those who don't know what that means, basically, your favorite YouTubers, the ones that a lot of people would call rage bait that you enjoy, they are conditioning you. Mike, do you want to explain what a Pavlovian response is?
So there was a professor back in the day by the name of Pavlov who trained his dog, if I remember correctly, to start salivating at the sound of a dinner bell. And he did this by associating giving the dog food and ringing a bell at the same time, just to see if the dog would start salivating as a result of just ringing the bell alone. And when he did finally do this, he rang the bell and the dog started drooling as if it was going to get its food. it's an automatic response to being like an associated sense. So yeah, the YouTubers are basically doing that to us, unfortunately, trying to get us associating new bill with new fear, and I'm not really certain if it's going to work out well for them, honestly.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement because this is something that we see all across YouTube. So it's not just like one specific genre. So people are going to piss off them saying your favorite YouTuber, but bread tubers do it, rage tubers do it, so on and so forth. The basic idea is that whenever they say a certain word, your instant response is bad. For example, where you don't really look into it, you don't really think about it, you just have the response. You know, the dinner bell has been rung, you have begun salivating. And Pavlovian responses, in my opinion, aren't like evil necessarily, but I think it's, you know, it can be used that way because there's also like there's Pavlovian responses in media, you know, and especially in advertisement, because that's the point, is they want to get you to buy things, and they want to, when you think of certain things, think of, you know, that whatever it is they're selling. For example, ba-da-ba-ba-ba, everyone in the audience just thought of McDonald's.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
it is.
So
I love McDonald's now.
see, it works. But no, all seriousness. The basic idea is that they want the clicks. Ergo, they don't really want you looking into this because, to be honest with you, a lot of people aren't going to be looking into this. At least that's my prediction. I would hope that we would see like law tubers actually break down what is in this. But we're going to do it for you. We're not law tubers, obviously, though I did have Hatman look through it, see if he disagreed with me on some points or wanted to elaborate on some things. I will be reading on his particular comments if he doesn't come in with us tonight. And then as we go on, me, Mike, and Serena will be talking about anime that could actually be affected by this, and ones that probably aren't going to, and ones where there could actually be an argument of court where we're going to see a back and forth on it if they were to try to ban it, which is a big if. Now, one thing that also needs to be mentioned is context. Context in law is everything. And a lot of times, legal cases, they are trying to figure out context, because you figure out the context of an action, you can figure out whether or not someone is guilty. For example, if you find somebody in an alleyway holding a bloody knife and they're standing over a dead body, what you have seen would give you an idea of what might have happened and what probably happened. But there is the distinct possibility that that person walked in with a knife, or walked in, found the dead body, found the knife, picked it up, and didn't think about what they were doing. And then the court case is there to find the context of that. You know, so there could be security footage that gives us what the context is. Did the person come in there and actually find it, or did they kill the guy? Stuff like that. That's largely what the law is looking for and how they actually prove something. So context is going to be a big part of this, and part of what has to happen whenever you're writing law is you have to develop context, or you have to create context as to what exactly is illegal and what is, considered it to be illegal and what is not considered to be illegal. So very specific definitions need to be made. So let's look at the bill itself. Now, for those of you who are playing the YouTube game, are actually going to be able to see me looking at the bill live. For those of you who are not, don't worry, I am going to be reading the relevant parts. So, the bill SB number 20, a bill to be entitled An Act Relating to the Creation of the Criminal Offense of Possession or Promotion of Obscene Visual Material Appearing to Depict a Child, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Texas, Section 1, Subchapter B, Chapter 43, Penal Code, is amended by adding Section 42.235 to read as follows. Possession or promotion of obscene visual material appearing to depict child. Now, here's the gimmick. In the law, it says, in this section, promote has the meaning assigned by, and then it gives a section, Visual material has the meaning assigned by a different section. We're actually going to read those because I actually watched one YouTube video and they didn't read either of them. Which, to that particular YouTuber, fuck you. Seriously. How the fuck, how dare you, like, actually mislead your audience like that? That's fucking vile. So.
I have the subsections as well up as looking at them, and I'm just like, oh, okay. This is a little less ridiculous.
Yeah.
Go on.
So, the first thing we need to go over is promote. What does Texas law define as promote? So, Section 43.21, Part 5, promote means to manufacture, issue, sell, give, provide, lend, mail, deliver, transfer, transmit, publish, distribute, circulate, disseminate, present, exhibit, or advertise, or to offer or agree to do the same. So that is what that means. Now, we need to go over what the definition of obscenity is. Obscene, so this is in the same section, 43.21. Obscene means material or a performance that, A, the average person applying contemporary community standards, this effectively means, this is where Hatman came in, this effectively means what the jury would decide on. Because this is, of course, the court of your peers is where this is going to be judged. Because this is a felony that we're talking about, a Class 3 felony. It could land you in jail for up to 10 years in Texas with a substantial, like, $10,000 fine, I think. Would find that taken as a whole appeals to the prurient interest in sex. So specifically, the jury would be deciding, is the context of this particular material, is the purpose of it sexual? Part B, depicts or describes patently offensive representations or descriptions of ultimate sexual acts, normal or perverted, actual or stimulated, including sexual intercourse, sodomy, and sexual bestiality, or patently offensive representations or descriptions of masturbation, excretory functions, sadism, masochism, lewd exhibition of the genitals, male or female genitals in a state of sexual stimulation or arousal, covered male genitals in a discernibly turgid state, means an erection, or a device designed and marketed as useful primarily for stimulation of human genital organs, and taken as a whole lacks serious literary, artistic, political, and scientific value. That last part is very important, so hold on to that for now. So that is what promote means, and that is also what obscenity means. Now we need to specifically go into the next definition, which is visual material. So visual material means any film, photograph, videotape, negative meaning it's undeveloped film, or slide that any photographic reproduction that contains or incorporates in any manner any film, photograph, videotape, evident negative slide, or any disc, diskette, so we're getting into the digital stuff now, or other physical medium that allows an image to be displayed on a computer or other video screen, and any image transmitted to a computer or other video screen by telephone line, cable, satellite transmission, or other method. The affirmative defenses provided by sections also apply to prosecution under the section. So, and then effectively where the part of the law comes in regards to what the felony is, an offense under subsection A is a felony of the 3rd degree, except that offense is a felony of the 2nd degree, so the penalties go up. It is shown on the trial of the offense that the person has been previously convicted of one time of an offensive matter under the subsection. Basically, you do this more than once, you're going to get higher penalties. Or the person possesses visual material that contains 10 or more visual depictions of a child as described by subsection A, but fewer than 50 such depictions, and a felony in the 1st degree. This means you're going away for a long-ass time. It is shown on the trial that the offense of the person has previously been convicted of 2 or more times of an offense under the subsection, or the person possesses visual material that contains 50 or more visual depictions of a child, as described by subsection A, or a videotape or film that visually depicts conduct constituting an offense under subsection 22. Basic idea is that the more you have of it, the higher the penalty goes. And like this is sort of like the disturbing thing about child pornography, and whenever you hear about it in regards to like on the news, it's very rare that you hear about somebody that was caught with like one or two things of it, right? It's almost always like they've got like gigabytes, and I think there was like an animator from California that was caught with terabytes of it.
It's usually an absurd amount. Like hundreds of videotapes, hundreds of images, and the scaling punishment scale is just absolutely perfect for getting rid of those motherfuckers.
Yeah. So, now granted, some people will probably argue one is enough to put them away for a long time. I don't necessarily disagree, but I'm not a legislator. So, I'm definitely against throwing the book at people who do this shit. That is for certain. So, what does the law state? A person commits an offense if the person knowingly possesses, accesses with intent to view, or promotes obscene visual material containing a depiction that appears to be of a child younger than 18 years of age, engaging in activities described by Section 43.21, which we went over, regardless of whether the depiction is an image of an actual child, a cartoon or an animation, or an image created using an artificial intelligence application or other computer software. One thing that I don't think federal law actually covers specifically is artificial intelligence. It hasn't been updated.
It's slowly being updated. Like, I do believe like Trump added a anti-deepfake law pretty recently, wasn't it?
I don't know if it was a law or if it was an executive order, but federal law is notoriously slow. So you know, it's up to, this is a big part of federalism in the United States, is that it's up to the states to take care of this. You can't rely on the Fed, and nor should you, in my opinion. But regardless, but this is very, very specific on what exactly it is. And then, of course, an offense under the section is a state jail felony, except that offense is a felony of the third degree. And then it goes into the stuff that I've already read about what is third degree, what is second degree. And then if a conduct constituting an offense under this section also constitutes an offense under another law, the actor may be prosecuted under this section or the other law, but not both. So they have to be specifically charged with this for this. So, what does it mean to commit the offense? Well, that just goes into like what an offense is and defines it in regards to what exactly by law is considered an offense. So, like murder, capital murder, basically lists a bunch of illegal stuff. So, what exactly does this mean for the world of anime, you might ask? Well, in my opinion, the language is very specific here. Sexual depictions of anyone under the age of 18. It states that pretty quickly. The other thing about the law, this is why we had to define obscenity, is also they have to argue whether or not there is actual artistic value to it. That's where context comes in. So basically what you might be asking, well, what does that mean? Well, in the context of a courtroom, what has to be proven by the prosecution is that the person that did the offense was imbibing something that had sexual depictions of a minor, but on top of that, it was solely there to be the sexual depiction of a minor. That is the purpose of the art. In most cases, like probably the large swath of law in Texas, when this is going to come into account, is going to be very blatant. It is a sexual depiction of a minor in anime form. You know, effectively like a 12-year-old getting railed. The one thing that I always told people is that like where things start to get creepy is when it is specifically about sex. It is one thing to have a character in an anime that is underage, that is wearing a specific outfit. It's one thing to have them wear that. It's another thing to have them getting railed by somebody. The first one is up to interpretation. The second one is pretty specific in regards to what it is trying to do. Effectively, the rule of thumb is that there's nothing wrong with having children in an anime or anything like that. I think that saying otherwise is ridiculous. Where it gets ridiculous is the simple idea that, there are some anime out there that seem to specifically sexualize people under the age of 18, and it's blatant. And that is sort of where there's going to be some wiggle room and where there could be bans of specific anime. So, for example, largely what this is going to cover is hentai. So, from what I'm reading of this, any hentai that depicts someone under the age of 18 getting fucked is out the window. You can't look at it in Texas. It's illegal.
So Boku no would be illegal.
Potentially, yeah. In fact, a lot of and this is sort of where things get crazy, because the age of consent in Japan is different than the United States. And that is sort of like where it starts to get fuzzy. Because I'm trying to remember, I think what is the age of consent in Japan? I know it got updated.
It was originally 14 for the longest until they decided to change it a couple of years ago to 18.
I went on to Grok, which is not always reliant, so don't quote me on this. Grok says the age of consent in Japan is 13, as set by Japanese Penal Code. However, ordinances and other laws, like the Child Welfare Act, often impose stricter regulations, effectively raising the age for sexual activities in many contexts to be 16 or 18, depending on the prefecture and specific circumstances. For example, engaging in sexual activities with someone under 18 can be restricted if it involves exploitation or coercion. Always check local laws for clarity, as they vary. So, it's very situational, it seems. And at least from where I'm sitting, I've mentioned this many times. This has kind of been a point of contention for me in Japanese media. Is whenever you will portray an underage character, underage being under the age of 18, as very sexual. It's very weird to me. But then again, there is a substantial cultural difference between us and Japan.
Me.
Yeah. So, now I did message Hatman. He asked if his expertise would be needed, and I said, come on in. So hopefully he will join us here in a minute. But one thing that I put in, because I had a discussion with somebody in my Discord server about this, as I said, there is a spot in this that is broad. In most cases prosecuted, that would be what the statement appears to be a child. In most cases prosecuted, that would be read as sexually explicit drawings of actual children. The problem is that appears can be interpreted two different ways. One way is the artistic sense, in that it's not an actual person being depicted, but it's a fictional character. Then there's the more interpretive version, where you could prosecute based on the opinion that a character is underage. This is where we get into the lolly debate, which Hatman came in on that, and again, hopefully he shows up for the show, but he had basically said that, this is one of those things where it's not going to be, they're going to have to discuss in court what exactly is the context of the character. If it is a grown woman that happens to be petite, then there's not really, like, it's obviously not a child. The context of the anime is not even trying to pretend that this is a child, so on and so forth. Admittedly, I'm trying to think if there's any notable, like, flat adult characters in anime off the top of my head.
In a Vampire Bun.
Yeah, Dance in the Vampire Bund is one.
Because technically speaking, Mina she's an adult, but she makes herself look like a child in order to escape any suitors. There have been plenty of points in the manga where she's shown in an adult form. She just chooses to look like a child and dress a certain way because vampire.
Yeah. So that one, I'm not quite sure where they would go with it.
Plus, there's the 1,000-year-old loli trope that everyone loves. That she's not.
Yeah, how would that work with a 1,000-year-old loli?
That I'm not sure.
They're adults.
Yeah, because that's a tough one. I don't know how. That's where the jury's gonna come in. How you have to get it past the jury. You better have a really solid argument, because.
Hello.
Wait, we have Hatman?
Yeah.
Yes, he's right there.
Yes, you have Hatman.
All right. So we are joined by a Hatman.
Yeah, haven't heard of me in a while, huh?
Yeah. So for those who do not know, if there is anyone who does not know, Hatman here, of course, is my business partner. He's the vice president of Grindstone Arts and the co-owner, and also my editor as well. In fact, we have an announcement for that we will be having at the end of the episode. So, because there's good news there. But Hatman is also in the process of becoming Lawyer Man.
Yes, I am transitioning, as you will, legally speaking.
But where we are getting into, we've gone over kind of the basics of the bill at this point. I went over the definitions of promote visual material that are in Texas penal codes. And what offense means, all that stuff, right? Because I felt like that was a big part of, like, what wasn't being discussed.
Right.
Can you, for the audience's sake, can you kind of give them an idea of what it means when it comes to, because I feel like one thing we're going to have to talk about is the Miller Act. Or was it the Miller test?
It's not the act. It's a test. It was a Supreme Court. It was a Supreme Court ruling.
Yeah.
And the Miller test derives from that. But basically, the Texas law is just a more strict version of the Miller test. So I suppose it'd be better off to start with that. So the Miller test is basically it's testing for obscenity. Obscene material is not considered to be covered under First Amendment speech protections. So the case came from Miller v. California, and it was back in 1972 or 73, I think. But basically, it resulted in a three-pronged test for obscene materials, because prior to that, it was basically like I know it when I see it sort of thing. And that is like a legit quote from Oliver Wendell Holmes, I think is who said it. Or Potter Stewart, one of the two. Anyway, so replaces that test 3 prongs. You have to meet all 3 of these to be considered obscene material. It's not 2 out of 3. It's not 1 out of 3. You have to meet all 3 criteria. It has to result from the average person applying contemporary community standards, finding the work appeals to the prurient interest of the masses. Now, that pretty much means that the work is basically exclusively made just to get people off. Like it is specifically designed to appeal as sexually gratifying material. And this is, again, the average person applying contemporary community standards. So this is an objective standard, but a question for a jury. A judge cannot decide this on their own. Okay, second prong of the test. The work has to be patently offensive. So this is typically um, offensive sexual conduct, child pornography falls under this category. Like some BDSM technically would fall under that category, or excretionary material. So like your scat stuff.
Now, one quick
Again,
thing.
this is okay.
We did kind of go over it, but in federal law, is it as specific as it is in Texas law in regards to what is
No.
considered obscene?
No, it's the Texas law is a lot more specific. I mean, it has specific elements that have to be met for the material. Under federal law, it's a lot more loose. It's basically just those two. It's offensive sexual conduct or excretionary functions.
Yeah, because the Texas law goes into like super specific stuff. I mentioned a little bit of it earlier, but for those of you, in fact, I'll go ahead and show this on screen real quick. Is that it actually goes over? Let me highlight it. Like obscene device, which includes like pocket pussies, dildos, stuff like that. It goes over what is considered obscene display, so on and so forth. So that stuff is not in federal law.
No. Mm-mm.
That's
no
terrible.
Yeah, it's very loose in how it defines obscenity, and people like to kind of doomer and say, well, technically this means like all pornography could be considered obscene because if contemporary community standards change and people don't like it anymore, then that makes it obscene material. But the Supreme Court has never decided whether or not pornography, or even like some of the more extreme stuff, like even up to like bestiality levels, is considered obscene material.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that they just don't touch because it's really hard to prosecute someone for like possession or distribution of obscene material, except in the cases of CP, of course. That's like understood across the board to be obscene and not protected.
Yeah, because it seems like a lot of this law is like there was a painstaking amount of detail given to making it as specific as humanly possible. Like this is specific about pornography. Like that is the main focus of it. Now,
and to some degree, you kind of have to be specific about that if you're trying to root out certain pornographic materials, because you can't you wouldn't be able to get away with just saying like it appeals to the prurient interests, and if it's material that looks like the act of baby making, then it's obscene. Like that's probably going to get slapped by the Supreme Court. So you have to be a little bit more specific with it, because then you stand a chance of getting away with a ruling in your favor at that point.
Yeah. Now, from what you've read of the law, I was discussing it a little bit before you came in, but where do you think the it's up for interpretation starts coming in? Because a lot of people are saying that this law is a little too broad. I don't know if you agree with that sentiment. I don't necessarily, but what do you think?
So it comes in with the third prong of the Miller test and the third prong of the Texas law. The work has to lack serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. That's where you're going to have a lot of the argument, like in favor of anime and movies and whatnot. You say, well, it's done for artistic purposes, and the doomerism that's coming in, that's like, oh well, this could ban all these animes or mangas or doujins or whatever, or however the hell you pronounce that word.
Dojin. You were close.
But that is all. That's all doomerism, and that is a lot of what ifs, because again, the first two prongs of that three-prong test, and again, you have to meet all three prongs to be considered obscene material. The first two are based on objective standards, and those are jury questions. So a jury is going to have to decide if the material is obscene, and if or not obscene, if the material relates to the prurient interest, and um, if it's considered patently offensive. The third part of it is a little bit more determinable. It is still ultimately a question that it's not specifically a jury question. A judge could rule on it, but a jury could hear evidence for it, whether or not it's got the artistic or literary value. And typically, that's what it's going to fall into. It's going to be your smut books, and it's going to be like your average hentai or ecchi anime or something like that. But those are. It's going to be a lot easier to argue that they have serious artistic value behind them, because they are not created for the sole purpose of getting people off. Like, well, hentai might be a little different, but like your average, like a high school DxD or something, that's got a little bit more to it than just E&A all the time. And I know that's kind of weird of me to say right now, because that anime is basically just TNA, but it still has more value beyond that. It is not exclusively that. So it'd be a lot easier to argue that that should be okay.
So there's more of a chance that flat out hentai that depicts two 16-year-olds going at it would be banned in Texas than something like High School DxD.
It's possible, but like if it's got a story behind it, and I mean like more of a story than just like your average porno where it's like an inciting situation. The cable guy comes over and then he drops
how we
his
got
pants.
there, basically.
Yeah, no. If it has more story behind that, then you have a stronger argument that it has serious artistic value behind it. Even if it depicts people under the age of 18, because again, the Texas law, like the federal standard, is a three-pronged test. Just because it depicts characters who are purported to be underage does not automatically make it obscene material. It has to meet all three objectives.
Mm-hmm. Well, that I think leads us to the interesting part of this, because I could see where, like, there's probably a decent amount of hentai out there. I will admit, in my more Coomer days of my life, I had imbibed. There were ones that were set in high schools, and it was clearly two people that are under the age of 18.
Sure.
Yeah, like that I would think, at least from the way the law reads, that would be something that we could end up seeing banned in Texas.
You could, but it's not guaranteed.
Yeah.
Again, this is it's going to be up to a jury to decide almost every single time, because two of your three prongs mandate a jury finding of fact. So if they decide, hey, this for example, this character is intended to be 1,000 years old, but just so happens to look 10, that could be okay.
Yeah, well, we'll table that for a second, because I want to specifically mention hentai here, because I feel like there's levels to this. Like, I feel like the pornography is the main thing that Texas is going after.
Yes.
I feel like in a weird way we're going back to the Micah and the Hatman on politics days with this, but I feel like one thing that needs to be understood, like, because people are gonna freak out about this and think that things are gonna start becoming banned everywhere and da 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 da. You guys got to understand that the United States is a country that, at least it's still in practice, uses federalism, which,
yes,
if you need our political backgrounds, Hatman and I are federalists.
Yes.
We very much love the idea of states having their own cultures, and Hatman's state has a better
member
culture
of
than
the
mine.
Federalist Society.
Yeah, say that like I have literally said when I went out to North Carolina for a little bit, it's like I like your state's culture than mine, because Illinois kind of sucks. But regardless,
just a bit.
Yeah. Regardless, the I feel like the main thing that I feel like that's where the main bit of discussion is going to come whenever it comes to this particular bit, and what we might actually see in courtrooms would it be that they're going after hentai specifically, because like we saw ages ago, like Blue Sky, when it started kicking off after the election, there was a major child porn problem there.
Oh, there was so fucking much there. Holy shit.
Yeah. So I feel like that's the main concern of the Texas government, at least the way that I can tell from what I've read. I could be wrong, but that's what I have seen. And it seems to be the way that the law is written, that's their primary concern. But every once in a while you get a Jack Thompson-minded person that comes along and wants to censor shit because they are personally offended, even though that's not necessarily what the law defines as obscene. So this goes into the next part where, as a group, we'll discuss what exactly it is we could see a court case over. One of which that I wanted to discuss, and we were talking about before the show, is redo of Healer. That one I think would be a tough one to argue in court. Admittedly, I have not seen it. I have only seen clips of it. But
I'm completely unfamiliar with this one.
Mike, Serena, have either of you seen it?
I apologize. I had to run off real quick. What was that?
No, I haven't seen it.
Okay, so Serena's not seen Redo of Healer. Mike, have you?
I've seen enough of it, and it's as prurient as the idea is. It's mostly story. So I mean, it's not always him getting raped or him raping anybody else. It's mostly him dealing with, like, getting revenge in a very, very, very brutal fashion for the amount that he's been brutalized himself. And it gets pretty fucking... He gets into some pretty awful situations. And creates pretty awful situations using his power. So it's a gigantic revenge story, and the average age of the protagonists are all 14, 15 years old, and listening to Hatman here, and I don't know if they couldn't argue that it doesn't lack an artistic or political like stance, unfortunately.
Yeah, I feel like that's where the tricky part is going to be, because again, this is like second and third hand information for where I'm at. I'm told that like some of the sexual assault scenes play out kind of like a hentai, like they are egregiously long, and like you could like they make it a little too obvious as to what's going on. Like you actually, it's filmed like a softcore hentai, is what someone told me. I don't know if there's any truth to that.
It's a good portion. The sex scenes are basically softcore hentai for the most part.
Yeah, that's where I feel like there's going to be a tricky part and where something would need to be argued in court, because I feel like whenever you cover heavy topics like this, because Berserk came up as well in this, and that'll obviously be a point of discussion that I'm much more able to comment on because I'm such a massive fan of it, though I think all of us here have read it. The Eclipse comes to mind. You know, what happens to Casca. And the way that the Casca thing, we don't actually see much of the act itself happen. It's implications. Like you put two and two together. More of what you're seeing during the course of it is Guts trying to get to her, and what is happening to him, and then the implications of what is happening to her, and then we see the after effect. Like, the actual process of humping is not seen at all. At least not from what I remember. So the argument, in my opinion, like, with that one is a little bit more clear-cut. It's obviously being portrayed as horrifying. The context of... Well, not to mention, Casca is over the age of 18 at that point anyway, so it wouldn't come up. But, you know, like, that is obviously meant to horrify the reader. That's the intent. The redo of Healer, I feel, is more of in a kind of, like, gray area. Which... Some people have kind of compared it to 30 Shades of... was it 30 Shades of Grey or 40 Shades of Grey? I forget.
50 Shades of Grey.
50 Shades. God, I was nowhere close. But, so I've had a lot of people compare it to 50 Shades of Grey because apparently there's a huge swath of people. Serena, you'll have to confirm whether or not this is the truth, that there's a lot of girls who really like Redo of Healer for some reason.
Yeah, unfortunately. There's a lot of girls who are into weird, fucked up pornographic material where a man basically either rapes or abuses or mind fucks a woman.
Jesus. Girls, if you find yourself into that sort of thing, please seek therapy. Good God. But regardless, yeah, I feel like that Redo of Healer is one that we might see in a courtroom. And that would be an interesting thing because it's not just you're going to have to argue that these acts are meant to be seen as horrifying, whereas, you know, like the context of something like Berserk, I think is or something like Devilman Lady, which again also deals with adults from what I remember. Like a lot of the those I think would be probably, because it's dealing with adults, there's no real argument to be made there in a courtroom. But ones that, again, if they're under the age of 18, that's when you start having the problem, because and this is the big thing, there is obviously a major cultural difference between what is found acceptable in Japan and what is found acceptable in the United States, specifically in Texas. You know, Japan, we mentioned this before you came in, Hatman, like their age of consent laws are kind of all over the place. Whereas in the United States, it's very specific, just about in every state. And then, I don't know is there a federal age of consent?
No, it varies from state to state, and it goes from 16 to 18, depending on the state.
Yeah, because Texas, their age of consent is 17, but in this specific law, it's under the age of 18. So, regardless,
well, I think at least as far as pornography on a federal level, I think you have to be 18 because it has to depict adults or people over the age of majority, which of course is 18 federally. So I think that's the reason why it's worded the way that it is. But getting back to your point, I don't think this is as much of a gray area as you think it is. Mostly because of that first prong. I mean, it has to appeal to the prurient interests of, you know, the contemporary society. And unless Redo of Healer was made explicitly to get people off, like if it was made explicitly as fetish material, then I don't think it's going to meet that prong. And as a result, if it fails the first test, then it's going to fail the overall test.
Well, yeah, and that's what I was thinking, is that's where the contention would happen in court, is like they're going to have to prove beyond a shadow of the doubt that the point is not to titillate but to horrify.
Yeah, sure.
So,
sure. I mean, the appeal, or not appealing, but the test for, you know, artistic value, I think would be more of a gray area, because you could very well easily argue that, you know, copious depictions of sexual assault are not considered art.
Yeah.
You could argue that it is, because it's trying to make a statement about something, so it's got artistic and political value there.
Yeah.
I don't know. But the first prong, I think, is a lot more clear for these purposes. At least for like any kind of anime that tries to have a story behind it.
See, yeah,
So yeah, that's going to make it a lot difficult then, I think.
yeah, because ultimately, yeah, like I feel like a lot of people are freaking out because they're forgetting the part of like having to prove that it doesn't have some sort of artistic value. That's not easy to prove.
Mm-hmm.
And largely is just going to come down to the jury from what it sounds like.
Yeah, sure. And juries tend to err on the side of protecting speech, as opposed to restricting it. So it's still an uphill battle for the state of Texas um, to continue on with. Like if they and even then, you could take it to an appeals court and say, the prosecution violates your First Amendment rights, and then it becomes a federal question, and then it goes beyond um, the state court of Texas, and then goes to the federal courts. And the federal courts are way more allowing of free expression as opposed to censorship.
Yeah, because like there's another one that I know Serena has said, like what Magical Girl Apocalypse and Magical Girl Sight both have similar depictions, don't they?
A little bit. If I remember correctly, there is a character that's called Titty Chan in Magical Girl Apocalypse. She's basically just walking, talking, fan service character. But she's very clear.
Fucking
Like,
name.
she's supposed to be like a joke.
Yeah, that manga was a fucking trip.
Yeah. Now there is kind of like a attempted rape, multiple attempted. Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
With the cop character, there is scenes of him like with his pants down and with two undressed, very clearly teenage high school girls who don't have like a. Basically, they all have underwear on. It is very clear that there's no bottoms there, but it's not like it's not defined. The genitalia is not shown, but you know that they're not wearing anything down there. Now in Magical Girl Sight, there is an attempted rape in like the first episode, first few chapters of the manga, but nothing goes anywhere. It's just edgy schlock. It's not really pornographic, but it's just like using sex and sexual assault to shock value.
Yeah.
Mm.
So even then, like that would be still considered to be artistic in nature. It could be considered humorous. It could be considered horrifying. It's not necessarily meant to specifically titillate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm curious about Dancing a Vampire Bun.
Yeah, that's.
If you've heard that, then have you heard of that anime or manga?
I haven't, no.
It's about the vampire queen wanting to integrate with the human world, but she faces opposition from both the vampires and the humans. But the vampire queen is like she's basically another example of the 1,000-year-old lolly trope.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, she's a woman, but she chooses to utilize the body of a child in order to dissuade people, or to dissuade like potential suitors. But the manga, I'm not sure about the anime because I haven't watched the anime, but I had seen some scans of the manga showing her as like a big-breasted woman, so she can like shapeshift her appearance. It's just that she chooses the bio child. She's this character. If you look on the cover art, she is basically dressing in nothing but lingerie and posed in a very like seductive manner.
Mm-hmm.
But in the context of the anime, she's like over 1,000 years old. She's like I think she's a Dracula.
I think that one. I think that one it would be a little easier to argue that this is in fact an adult character if if she can shapeshift, like as opposed to the one that comes to mind for me. I mean, um, it's not in the anime itself, but the dragon maid's character, who is like 1,000 years old and is a little girl. So
Yeah,
like any kind of lewd art of her, and I know the old expression, don't lewd the dragon lolly, but
now
it
in the
exists. So
that character, she's never looted. Is the other is the big-breasted dragon chick that gets looted the most?
mhm.
But
But
the other little lolly girl, dragon girl, she's always they treat her a child like how you should a child in any media.
So
that's in the
basically,
anime.
this is where we get into the thing of like I mentioned this early on, and I feel like that there is the legal distinction needs to be made here. Is that it is one thing to depict a child in media. One example I use is Elpeo Puru from Gundam Double Zeta. But what was the name of the little dragon in Dragon Maid? I forget.
I forget entirely. I don't remember any of those characters' names anymore. It's been so long since I've seen it.
Started with a K. I don't remember, but Kana.
Anna, maybe.
Yeah,
Okay.
Kana.
Kana.
It's or like depict that like having a child be there is one thing. Having them railed by someone, that's where the illegal part comes in here.
Mhm.
Like it's pretty blatant. So I really feel like honestly, the more that I've looked into this law, the more I have to say, man, like YouTubers who have covered it, I know Kotaku in Action has also, they're freaking out about it right now. Probably a lot of, like, none of them are actually reading what's in the law. They're probably freaking out and saying that it's the fucking end of the world. Like, this is nowhere even close to being what everyone else is saying it is.
No, it's a lot of doomerism behind it, and a lot of panic over a bunch of what ifs and maybes, and people aren't looking at the law itself. They're not looking at the tests, and they fundamentally don't understand the concept of what an objective standard is. And to be fair, you do have to be versed a bit in law to know that, but it doesn't take more than a internet search to find out, what an objective standard is or what a jury question is, anything like that. Like it at some point, it's ignorance on the part of the people freaking out, willful or otherwise.
Yeah. I personally tend to, at least when it comes to content creators, my assumption is always that they're trying to develop the Pavlovian response. They're trying to basically give or get you to a point that you hear about this and you get angry, and anger means clicks, so on and so forth. But the fact of the matter is that for those out there who are listening to this, because I am going to title this episode "Your Favorite YouTuber is Getting This Wrong." Yeah, this is nothing to fucking freak out about. Like what they are going after is not your favorite anime. Berserk is not going to get banned, or any of these is not going to get banned. Supposedly Japanese people are, like, some Japanese companies are wondering if they're going to have to censor their fucking anime. They're not. Like, if they do, that's on them. It's not on the law. Like, so as it stands, like, yeah, I'm endlessly frustrated by the absolute fucking lies that get put around the internet. And admittedly, my reaction has been a bit stronger because I have been watching discussions of certain, like, political things, and every time, I swear to Christ, every time a bread tuber talks about what is going on over in Israel, they get everything wrong, and they are lying purposefully, and it's driving me fucking insane. So fuck bread tubers, man. Fuck culture warriors too. Like, Jesus Christ, this is the one thing that aggravates me most about this. Figuring this shit out once I actually read the bill was not hard. I'm not the law student here, and I think I had a pretty good reading of it, unless I'm wrong.
No, you were basically spot on.
So it's not like the legalese is so fucking deep in this bill that, you know, like the intent of it is like obfuscated. Anyone who's saying the otherwise is being an autist. Because and this is something I don't mean to be mean. People get on me for making fun of autism too much. One thing you guys got to understand, that there's people that have autism online that freak out about these things, that go over 50,000 meanings of one word, as opposed to trying to find out what the letter and spirit of the law actually is, and they get everything wrong.
Or they'll focus on like one aspect of the test and miss that and part in between, you know, prongs 2 and 3, implying that, you know, you need all of it. So it's not worth getting hung up over one part when you need all 3. And it's not even limited to the autists on that one. It's, you know, people just skip over things that are either inconvenient for them or, you know, whatever. Maybe they just miss it in general, and it's one of those things that, like, you see it later and you're like, oh, that was kind of obvious. Maybe I'm just stupid for missing it. But you freak out over it anyway.
Yeah. So what I will try to do on the YouTube version of this particular video or this podcast is I will link the penal code and the bill itself in the description of that particular video for anybody who wants to read it for yourself and come to your own conclusions. Obviously, we encourage that here. But as it stands, yeah, this was not worth freaking out about. If you see anybody out there that is freaking out about it, tell them to stop freaking out about it. Feel free to point them our way if you like. And yeah, if you enjoyed the show, please don't forget to, of course, leave us a review on your podcast network of choice, or hit the like button on YouTube. We greatly appreciate it. And I don't really think that there's anything else to discuss there except for an announcement. So, I have mentioned in past few episodes that I have been working on a new novella. And that new novella is now complete. I have completely finished the script. It's done. Now Hatman will edit it, and then once it is completed, we are not going to futz around. We're not doing any crowdfunding bullshit or anything like that. We are simply just publishing this. We're putting it on Amazon through their program. Obviously, you know, Grindstone will handle publishing if it goes to any other stores. And it goes without saying that Hatman has not read it yet.
But no, I have not.
This was probably one of the darker stories that I've written, and I've written a lot of them. And this one actually kind of took a chunk out of me. Serena, since you have actually read through it, because Serena was my test reader on this, what were your general thoughts of it without spoiling the plot?
It was good. I love the build up to the climax of the story, because it was unexpected. I like how you were able to do distinction between the two authors or writers of the entries. That's what I'm gonna say. It's a pretty sad story. You realize it involves like college kids.
Yeah, it was one of those things where I wanted to try to do, like, one of my biggest inspirations for it was like SCP stuff, and I wanted to kind of give the perspective of someone who is what the event is, or who the event is happening to, and then someone who has to deal with the aftermath and the continued issue after a certain event, and how it concludes. Because that's kind of something that, like, I always found a little bit weird about Lovecraft. Not that I'm like saying I'm better than Lovecraft or something, because Lord knows I'm not. But one thing that I found a little weird is that, like, the ability of someone to actually write a journal entry when they are effectively suffering from madness. But, you know, it's just one of those things where I wanted to instead shift to the perspective of the person who is treating the patient, and what their observations are up until the conclusion of the story. So, yeah, I'm really stoked about it. It's not a big story. It's a novelette. It's only 40 some odd pages. But it is, I'm very proud of it, to say the least. So, for those of you curious, keep on the lookout for it. The title of the book is Everything Went Black, which is admittedly, the title is from a song by the band The Black Dahlia Murder, and the book is actually dedicated to the memory of the late Trevor Strnad, who was the lead singer of that band.
I know who that person was.
The thing about me and the Black Dahlia Murder is that I never met Trevor, except for a fist bump that I gave him after a show, because he actually walked past me, and I just said, "You're awesome." I saw the Black Dahlia Murder twice here in Bloomington. They are two of the best metal shows I've ever gone to, and I've gone to a lot of really good ones. The thing that made it notable to me is that here in the city I live in, like, there is not really a death metal scene. Like, there are people who like metal, but it's a lot of people that are my age and older who listen to Metallica, Megadeth, Pantera, stuff like that. So a bigger name band like Hell Yeah or Ghost or something like that, they will fill a venue that's about that's south of where I live, called the Castle Theater, which is kind of like the main place that it's not an arena, it's a theater, obviously. Those bands will fill out the castle, no problem. However, there are other bands and groups that come in that are smaller that don't necessarily fill it out. Like, might even fill like barely a quarter of it. So it's like barely over 100 people. The first show that I went to with them was, it was them, Skeleton Witch, Fallujah, and a band called Wolfhammer, which they sucked. They were terrible. It was the lead singer had an emo coif at a metal show. The fuck is wrong with you, dude? And I know I've told this story 1,000 times, but it's important to me. Regardless, we get all the way up to the last two bands, Skeleton Witch and the Black Dahlia Murder. Specifically, like, with the Black Dahlia Murder, I have watched live performances of them where they go on to, like, Wacken Open Air or the Download Festival or something like that, and they play their asses off, right? They came with that same energy at a show with maybe 110 people there. And I have... That taught me a lot about being a performer. Because they were not worried about the fact that it was a small venue. They were not worried about the fact that there wasn't a huge turnout. They didn't mind it at all. They just went out and played their asses off. They got everybody moshing. They got everybody jumping. Everything like that. They were wholly devoted to putting on the best show possible. What that taught me as an entertainer was that the audience size doesn't matter. You always bring it. Always. If you don't, whoever is there will eat you alive and you will never grow. But if you do put 110% into it, the next time you come around, it will get bigger. Because the second time I saw them, the crowd doubled. And the bands that were underneath them on the card, nowhere near as well known as the other ones. But the audience doubled because of how good that last performance that they put on was. So, Trevor Strnad is a guy that, like, when I heard he had committed suicide, I was legit very, very sad. Because I think we did a requiem to him during Micah the Hatman when we were doing that, and I was pretty busted up. So, I wanted to do that and put 110% of myself into this novel as sort of my tribute to him and his music inspiring me as a writer. So, hopefully people will really enjoy the book. And I'm going to see if I can find a way to send a copy of it to Black Dahlia Murder's, their record label, to maybe it'll get to the band, because the band is continuing on after Trevor's death. So I just want them to know that, you know, what his performances and what their performances as a group meant to me. So on that note, I just want to say thank you to everyone again for listening. We're going to go ahead and take off. So for Hatman, for Serena, and for Mike, my name is Micah Curtis, the president CEO of Grindstone Arts. Have yourselves a great rest of your day.
Bye-bye.